Have you ever wondered what really happened before the first Mustang rolled off the assembly line? Most people think they know the Mustang story. April 17, 1964, the pony car revolution begins, and Ford changes automotive history forever. But if you thought the 1964 and a half Mustang was just another new car launch, you're dead wrong. The truth involves stolen prototypes hidden behind false walls, cars accidentally sold before they were supposed to exist, and convertibles literally bolted to a Disney ride. In the next few minutes, you'll discover 20 shocking secrets about the 1964 Ford Mustang prototype that Ford tried to keep under wraps for decades, including one prototype that was so radical it had to be hidden from insurance investigators for years. VIN 001 was accidentally sold. 3 days early, picture this. It's April 14, 1964, 3 full days before the Mustang's official launch, and Canadian pilot Stanley Tucker walks into a Ford dealership in St. John's, Newfoundland. Through a spectacular mix-up in paperwork and timing, Tucker drives away with serial number 5F08F100001, the very first production Mustang. For 72 hours, Stanley Tucker was the only private citizen on Earth who owned a Mustang. Ford executives were horrified when they discovered their mistake. This wasn't just any car. This was supposed to be the historic first unit, destined for a museum. The company immediately went into damage control mode, tracking down Tucker and beginning negotiations to get their precious VIN 001 back. But Tucker had fallen in love with his accidental piece of history. It would take Ford 2 years and an extraordinary trade to recover what they'd lost. They finally convinced Tucker to swap his historic Mustang for the 1 millionth Mustang produced, serial number 1000001. Today, that accidentally sold first Mustang sits in the Henry Ford Museum, but for a brief moment in 1964, it belonged to a Canadian pilot who had no idea he'd just bought the most important Mustang ever built. About 180 pre-production Mustangs carried the mysterious 05C code. Here's where Ford's pre-launch secrecy gets really interesting. Between 180 and 200 Mustangs built before the official production date carry a data plate code that has confused collectors for decades, 05C. Most people assume this meant these cars were built on March 5, 1964. They were wrong. The 05C wasn't a build date at all. It was an administrative flag, a secret marker that identified these cars as pre-production units. These weren't prototypes in the traditional sense. They were fully functional Mustangs, identical to what would roll off the production line, but built specifically to stock dealer showrooms before the April 17th launch. Ford wanted every dealer in America to have at least one Mustang on display when the advertising blitz hit. These pre-production cars wore consecutive VINs from approximately 100001 to 100180, and Ford went so far as to acid-etch sequence numbers on the radiator supports to track them. Today, finding an 05C Mustang is like finding buried treasure. They're the cars that existed before the Mustang officially existed. 12 brand new convertibles were bolted to Disney's Magic Skyway ride. When Ford partnered with Disney for the 1964 World's Fair, they didn't just display Mustangs, they literally bolted them to a ride. 12 brand new Mustang convertibles were permanently attached to Disney's Magic Skyway attraction using welded brackets and guide pins. These weren't motorized parade floats. The Mustangs were pulled along the track system while fairgoers sat inside, traveling through elaborate displays about the past, present, and future. The cars didn't propel themselves. They were essentially the world's most expensive ride vehicles. Each Mustang was modified with special reinforcements to handle the constant motion and weight of passengers. After millions of riders experienced their first Mustang while being pulled through a Disney attraction, these 12 convertibles faced an uncertain fate when the fair ended. Some were reportedly returned to Ford and destroyed, as they were too modified to sell as regular cars. Others may have been saved by employees. The exact fate of all 12 remains one of the Mustang's enduring mysteries. What we do know is that for 2 years, these Mustangs gave rides to more people than any other Mustangs in history without ever starting their engines. The story actually starts with a mid-engine V4. Before the Mustang became America's favorite pony car, it was something completely different, a mid-engine sports car with a German V4 engine. The 1962 Mustang I concept was built in just 100 days, and it looked nothing like the car that would eventually capture America's heart. This radical two-seater placed a 1.5-liter V4 engine from Ford's German Cardinal program directly behind the seats. It was more Lotus than Detroit, more European sports car than American muscle. Racing legend Dan Gurney demonstrated the Mustang Y at Watkins Glen in October 1962, lapping the circuit and showing off the car's handling capabilities. The crowd loved the performance, but Ford executives were watching their reactions carefully. They noticed something crucial. While enthusiasts admired the Mustang I's engineering, regular folks seemed puzzled. Where would you put groceries? What about the kids? The Mustang I taught Ford a valuable lesson. Americans might want a sporty car, but they needed a practical one. This experimental prototype, with its race-inspired engineering and impractical layout, forced Ford to completely rethink their approach. The Mustang I never made it to production, but without this mid-engine experiment, the Mustang we know might never have existed. Mustang II bridged concept to reality. After the Mustang I's mixed reception, Ford went back to the drawing board and created the Mustang II concept in 1963, not to be confused with the later 70s production car of the same name. This prototype was built by DST, Dearborn Steel Tubing, and it represented a complete philosophy shift. Gone was the mid-engine layout and exotic engineering. Instead, the Mustang II sat on a modified Falcon platform with a front-mounted V8 engine and seating for 4. This was the bridge between wild concept and production reality. The Mustang II toured auto shows throughout 1963, gauging public reaction and refining the formula. Unlike the Mustang I, crowds immediately understood this car. It was sporty but sensible, exciting but attainable. After its show tour ended, the Mustang II didn't get destroyed like many concepts. Instead, it lived on as a test mule, helping engineers develop the production car. Ford used it to test everything from suspension setups to interior layouts. The Mustang II made its formal debut on October 5, 1963, at Watkins Glen, the same track where the Mustang I had demonstrated a year earlier. But while the Mustang I had impressed the racing crowd, the Mustang II connected with everyone. This prototype proved Ford had finally found the right formula. 3 convertibles became Indy 500 pace cars. In record time, Ford's race against time to create Indy pace cars remains one of the most frantic episodes in Mustang history. In the first hour of regular production on March 9, 1964, 3 convertibles rolled off the line and were immediately rushed to Holman Moody's shop in Charlotte, North Carolina. These weren't leisurely transported. They were driven hard, arriving at Holman Moody with the paint barely dry. The shop had less than 2 months to transform street cars into pace cars capable of leading the Indianapolis 500 field. The modifications were extensive. Out came the 260 V8s, and went 289 high-performance engines. But Holman Moody didn't stop there. One pace car reportedly received enough modifications to produce about 450 horsepower, necessary to maintain pace car speeds while carrying extra weight from camera equipment and officials. The cars received special springs, shocks, and rear gear ratios. They added roll bars, special lighting, and communication equipment. On May 30, 1964, these Mustangs led the Indy field, introducing America's newest sports car to one of its largest audiences. After the race, the three pace cars scattered. One went to Ford executives, another to the Speedway Museum, and the third disappeared into private hands, spawning decades of replica pace cars and authentication controversies. The two-seat Shorty prototype was hidden behind a false wall. Of all the Mustang prototypes, none has a story quite like the Mustang III, better known as Shorty. This radical two-seater chopped about 16 inches from the standard Mustang's wheelbase, creating a compact sports car that looked like a Mustang that had been left in the dryer too long. Under the shortened hood sat a 260 V8 bored out to approximately 302 cubic inches and topped with triple carburetors. Designer Vince Gardner created Shorty as an experiment in minimalism. What was the absolute minimum needed to create a Mustang? The answer was a car that looked cartoonishly compressed, but reportedly handled like a dream. When Ford ordered all prototypes destroyed, Gardner couldn't bear to send Shorty to the crusher. Instead, he orchestrated an elaborate deception. Gardner had a false wall built in a storage area and hid Shorty behind it. For years, the car remained hidden while Ford's insurance company listed it as destroyed. The deception eventually unraveled when investigators discovered the hidden prototype. Gardner's emotional attachment to his creation cost him dearly, but it saved one of the most unique Mustangs ever built. Today, Shorty exists as a reminder that sometimes breaking the rules preserves history. The car that was supposed to be crushed survived because one designer loved it too much to let it die. Early Mustangs used generators instead of alternators. Here's a detail that separates true 1964.5 Mustangs from 1965 models: the electrical system. Early Mustangs came equipped with generators rather than the more modern alternators that would become standard. Look at the dashboard of an early car, and you'll see a red warning light labeled Gen instead of ALT. This wasn't just a labeling difference. It represented completely different technology. Generators were old-school belt-driven units that struggled to keep up with electrical demands at idle. Sitting in traffic with the headlights on and radio playing could drain the battery. Alternators, which Ford adopted for the 1965 model year, produced consistent power even at low engine speeds. The changeover happened around August 1964, making the generator another telltale sign of an early production car. Many restorers today face a dilemma: keep the original generator for authenticity or upgrade to an alternator for reliability. The generator pulley, brackets, and wiring are all different from alternator setups, making it obvious when a car has been converted. For collectors seeking absolute originality, that Gen light on the dash is like a birth certificate, proving their Mustang was born in those first exciting months of production. Early cars had non-adjustable passenger seats. Among the quirky features of 1964.5 Mustangs, the fixed passenger seat stands out as particularly odd. While the driver enjoyed fore and aft adjustment, passengers were stuck with wherever Ford decided to bolt their seat. This wasn't a cost-cutting measure on base models. Even well-equipped cars came with immovable passenger seats. The engineering reason was simple but frustrating. Ford's platform, borrowed from the Falcon, wasn't designed with dual seat tracks in mind. Adding passenger adjustment would have required floor pan modifications that would delay production. So Ford made the call: drivers could adjust, passengers would cope. Tall passengers found themselves cramped, while shorter ones couldn't reach the dashboard. Dealers reported complaints, but Ford's response was essentially, wait for the 1965 models. The fixed passenger seat created an unexpected collector's item. Today, finding an unmodified early car with its original rigid passenger seat mounting is increasingly rare. Many owners retrofitted 1965 seat tracks, making original fixed-seat cars more valuable to collectors seeking authenticity. It's a reminder that even revolutionary cars like the Mustang launched with compromises that seem absurd today. Ford staged a global reveal. At the New York World's Fair, Ford's launch strategy for the Mustang at the 1964 New York World's Fair was unprecedented in automotive history. They didn't just display a car. They created an experience that merged Disney magic with Detroit metal. Mustangs were strategically placed throughout Ford's pavilion and became integral to the fair experience. The Magic Skyway ride was the centerpiece, where those 12 convertibles carried 15 million visitors through time. But Ford's ambitions went beyond one ride. They coordinated a simultaneous reveal across multiple time zones, with Mustangs appearing in dealerships, on television, and in print on the same day. The World's Fair provided the perfect backdrop, a celebration of American innovation and the future. Ford's pavilion, designed by Welton Beckett, showcased the Mustang as transportation for tomorrow's families. They positioned the car not as a toy for the rich, but as an affordable dream for everyone. The strategy worked brilliantly. Fair visitors who rode in the Mustangs on the Magic Skyway often headed straight to Ford dealers. The combination of Disney showmanship and Ford marketing created a cultural phenomenon. By using the World's Fair as their launch platform, Ford didn't just introduce a new car. They created an event that 50 million fair visitors would remember forever. Pre-production cars were built to stock. Every dealer, Ford's plan to have Mustangs in every showroom on launch day, required military-style logistics and absolute secrecy. Starting in early March 1964, Ford began building pre-production cars specifically to ship to dealers before the April 17th launch. These weren't demos or loaners. They were fully saleable cars that dealers were forbidden to sell until the magic date. Each dealer received strict instructions. The cars could be displayed but not sold, shown but not driven, promoted but not delivered. Ford even sent special locks for the cars to prevent overeager salesmen from letting customers take test drives. The company threatened to cut allocations for dealers who broke the embargo. This created an electric atmosphere in showrooms nationwide. Customers could see and touch the Mustang but couldn't buy it. Some dealers reported people camping out overnight before the launch, determined to be first. The strategy generated massive free publicity as local newspapers covered the countdown. The pre-positioning meant that when Lee Iacocca appeared on television on April 16th to introduce the Mustang, millions of Americans were just minutes away from a Ford dealer with cars in stock. It was a logistics triumph that ensured the Mustang's launch would be a sales explosion, not a trickle. The Mustang One's V4 engine came from Germany. The heart of the original Mustang concept was an engine most Americans had never heard of, a 1.5-liter V4 from Ford's German subsidiary. This wasn't some exotic racing engine, but a practical power plant from the Cardinal project, which would later become the Taunus in Europe. The compact V4 produced about 90 horsepower, respectable for its size but hardly the thundering V8 Americans expected. Positioned behind the seats, the German engine gave the Mustang a distinctly European character. It sounded different too. Instead of the rumble of a V8, the V4 produced a higher-pitched, almost motorcycle-like note. Ford engineers appreciated the V4's compact dimensions and lightweight, perfect for a mid-engine layout. But market research revealed a crucial problem. Americans associated four-cylinder engines with economy, not performance. The European sophistication that Ford executives admired didn't translate to Main Street USA. The V4's failure to excite American audiences taught Ford a valuable lesson. When they developed the production Mustang, even the base engine would be a six-cylinder, with V8 options essential from day one. The German V4 experiment proved that building an American sports car required American power, no matter how clever the engineering. Mustang II made its debut at Watkins Glen. The choice of Watkins Glen for the Mustang II concept's debut on October 5, 1963, was no accident. Ford wanted to show they'd learned from the Mustang One's reception at the same track a year earlier. This time, instead of demonstrating exotic handling, they showcased practical sportiness. The Mustang II arrived at Watkins Glen as a fully realized preview of the production car. Gone were the mid-engine experiments and racing pretensions. This was a car real people could buy and use every day. The crowd's reaction was immediately different. Instead of admiring from a distance, people wanted to know when they could buy one. Ford executives circulated through the crowd, listening to comments and taking notes. They heard exactly what they'd hoped for. People talking about taking their families for drives, commuting to work, and weekend trips. The Mustang their kiddo had successfully bridged the gap between dream and reality. The Watkins Glen debut also served as a final validation before production. With manufacturing set to begin in just 5 months, this was Ford's last chance to gauge public reaction. The enthusiastic response confirmed what internal research had suggested. Ford had finally found the right formula. The Mustang II at Watkins Glen wasn't just showing a concept, it was previewing a revolution. Dealer pace cars numbered about 180. Special units beyond the 3 official Indy pace cars, Ford created approximately 180 special hardtops for dealers to use as promotional pace cars. These weren't just regular Mustangs with decals. They were specially ordered units with specific equipment designed to generate local excitement. Each district received an allocation of these dealer pace cars, coded with special order numbers. When demand exceeded supply, Ford authorized an additional batch on May 1, 1964, identified by the DSO 84 designation. These cars served as rolling advertisements, leading local parades and appearing at racetracks nationwide. The dealer pace cars created confusion that persists today. Unlike the 3 Holman Moody prepared official pace cars, these promotional units retained stock drivetrains. But dealers often added their own modifications: special wheels, extra lights, custom paint. This has led to countless tribute cars being passed off as original pace cars. Ford's strategy was brilliant. By creating these promotional pace cars, they multiplied the Indy 500 connection across the country. Every small-town parade or local race that featured a Mustang pace car reinforced the performance image. The program was so successful that Ford continued creating special promotional Mustangs for years, but none captured the magic of those first dealer pace cars that helped launch an icon. Regular production started March 9th, but hundreds already existed, the official job. One date for Mustang production was March 9, 1964, but that date tells only part of the story. By the time regular production began, hundreds of Mustangs already existed in various forms: prototypes, pre-production units, and show cars that had been touring the country for months. These early cars served different purposes. Some were engineering development vehicles, testing components that would go into production. Others were marketing tools, appearing at auto shows and dealer meetings. Still others were manufacturing pilots, used to train assembly line workers and debug the production process. The March 9th date marked when Ford transitioned from hand-built specialty units to mass production, but it created a numerical puzzle that confuses collectors today. How could VIN 100001 exist when cars with higher numbers were built weeks earlier? The answer lies in Ford's complex numbering system that assigned VINs by order scheduling, not build sequence. This pre-production period produced some of the most interesting Mustangs ever built. These cars often featured unique combinations of parts as engineers experimented with different configurations. Some had prototype components that never made production. Others showcased options that wouldn't be available until later. Each tells a story about the Mustang's development from concept to reality. The original V4 sat behind the seats. The Mustang Oz mid-engine layout wasn't just unusual for Ford. It was radical for any American manufacturer in 1962. Positioning the German VW4 behind the seats required completely reimagining what an affordable sports car could be. This layout offered theoretical advantages: better weight distribution, superior handling, and a lower hood line for improved visibility. But it also created massive practical problems. Where would luggage go? How would mechanics service it? What about heating and cooling systems that typically used engine heat? Ford engineers solved some issues creatively. They designed a small front trunk and squeezed storage wherever possible. The cooling system used complicated plumbing to move heat from the engine to the passenger compartment. But each solution added cost and complexity. The mid-engine layout also changed the driving experience dramatically. Without an engine up front, road feel was immediate and direct. The car's balance made it a joy on twisty roads. But it also made the Mustang feel foreign to American drivers accustomed to front-engine cars. Ultimately, the mid-engine experiment taught Ford that innovation had limits. Americans might want something different, but not too different. The production Mustang would keep its engine where customers expected it, under the hood, not behind their heads. Pre-production cars had acid-etched numbers on radiator supports. Ford's method of tracking pre-production Mustangs reveals the extraordinary lengths they went to maintain control over these early cars. Beyond the standard VIN plates, Ford acid-etched sequential numbers directly onto the radiator supports of pre-production units. This secondary numbering system served multiple purposes. First, it helped Ford track cars through the development process when official VINs might be reassigned or changed. Second, it provided a permanent record that couldn't be removed or altered like a data plate. The acid etching was typically small and positioned where it wouldn't be visible without looking for it. These etched numbers have become crucial for authentication today. While VIN plates can be swapped and data plates reproduced, the acid-etched numbers are nearly impossible to fake convincingly. They're like fingerprints for early Mustangs, providing irrefutable proof of a car's pre-production status. Collectors have documented patterns in these numbers that help identify when and why specific cars were built. Some sequences align with known show cars, others with engineering prototypes. A few gaps in the numbering suggest cars that were destroyed or have yet to be discovered. For restorers, finding an intact acid-etched number is like discovering a signature from the car's birth, a permanent mark that connects it directly to those exciting months before the Mustang changed everything. The Magic Skyway Mustangs couldn't move under their own power. The dozen Mustangs on Disney's Magic Skyway represented one of the strangest chapters in Mustang history. These weren't simplified shells or motorless mock-ups. They were complete, running Mustangs that were mechanically lobotomized for ride duty. Each car retained its engine and drivetrain for authenticity, but the connection between engine and wheels was severed. The engineering challenges were substantial. Disney's ride system required precise spacing and movement control that driver operation couldn't provide. So Ford and Disney engineers developed an elaborate system of guide rails, safety switches, and mechanical pulls that moved the cars along the track. Riders experienced a surreal sensation, sitting in a real Mustang, hearing the engine idle, feeling the vibration, but moving without acceleration or gear changes. The cars glided through scenes depicting past, present, and future, while passengers enjoyed the new car smell and touched real Mustang interiors. The psychological effect was powerful. Millions of fairgoers got their first Mustang experience without the car actually driving anywhere. They formed emotional connections with the styling, the seats, the dashboard, everything except the actual driving experience. It was perhaps the most successful stationary test drive in automotive history, selling the Mustang dream without burning a drop of gasoline in propulsion. Early engine options were limited but varied. The engine lineup for early Mustangs tells a story of rapid evolution and market response. When production began, buyers could choose from 3 engines: the 170 cubic inch 6-cylinder, the 260 cubic inch V8, and the 289 cubic inch 4-barrel V8D code. This limited menu would expand quickly, but it reveals Ford's initial market assumptions. The 176 was there for economy-minded buyers who wanted Mustang style without V8 fuel consumption. It produced just 101 horsepower, barely adequate for the car's weight. But Ford understood that many buyers, particularly women and younger drivers, cared more about looks than acceleration. The 260 V8 split the difference, more power than the 6, but better economy than the 289. At 164 horsepower, it provided respectable performance without scaring insurance companies. Many early Mustangs carried this forgotten engine that would disappear from the lineup by 1965. The 289 4-barrel was the early performance choice, but the real excitement came in June 1964 with the K-Code High Performance 289. This 271 horsepower screamer transformed the Mustang from stylish secretary's car to genuine performance machine. Its late addition suggests Ford initially underestimated how many buyers would pay extra for serious power. Ford executives panicked when they lost VIN 001. The accidental sale of the first production Mustang to Stanley Tucker created a crisis that reached the highest levels of Ford management. When executives discovered their historic first unit was driving around Newfoundland instead of heading to a museum, panic set in. Emergency meetings were called. How had this happened? Who was responsible? More importantly, how could they get it back? The Canada connection complicated matters. Tucker was a Canadian citizen who'd bought the car legally from a Canadian dealer. Ford couldn't simply demand its return or threaten legal action. They needed diplomacy and incentives. Lee Iacocca himself reportedly got involved in the recovery effort. The company assigned a team to negotiate with Tucker, who quickly realized he held all the cards. He'd paid $995 for his Mustang and wasn't interested in a simple refund. Ford tried increasingly generous offers, but Tucker had become attached to his unique piece of history. The 2-year negotiation that followed became a corporate embarrassment. Here was mighty Ford Motor Company, unable to recover a car they'd accidentally sold. Finally, the offer of the millionth Mustang, an even trade of historic vehicles, proved irresistible. Tucker's brief ownership of VIN 1 had cost Ford tremendous time, effort, and pride, but it also created one of the Mustang's most enduring legends. That's all for today, folks. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button so you don't miss the next one. See you there.